Tithing is not in the Bible, and it stops children from having the clothes that they need. Real stories, you can't make this stuff up. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. Now, when I say tithing, I don't mean the word. The word itself is in there. I mean the idea that you have to give 10% of your income to the church. In the Bible, there is an income assessment. It's 10% twice plus 2.5%. That's 22.5%. And I've never heard a pastor tell people that they should give the church 22.5% of their income. And of course, it's ridiculous just to take some idea from 3,000 years ago and bring it to today. But it's also important to note that at that time, the church and the state were combined. Giving to the church was also paying for all the things that taxes should pay for. But it's how this unbiblical teaching is used that is really insidious. When this is taught, in general, it's taught that the tithe, giving 10% of your income to the church, is the bare minimum. That is the minimum of what it means to be faithful to God. And normally they'll say to be faithful to God in your finances. And then, if you're in some of the worst kind of churches, the churches that teach the prosperity gospel, and there's a lot of them, and a lot of really big churches are these churches. Those churches will say not only is it the bare minimum, but what you give to God is tied to what God gives to you. That if you give your money to God, that God will give money back to you. And all of this is horrifyingly bad. Because when people are poor and they are clinging to religion for hope, when they are clinging to God for this, like, hopefully maybe I can make it, hopefully I can have enough money, are being told that they need to give 10% of their income as a minimum to God in order to be considered faithful in their finances to God. And so in order for their finances to be blessed by God, in order for their finances to come under the blessing and favor of God. This isn't the first time I've said this. And since I've said it, I've heard story after story of people who were very poor, who were living hand to mouth, who didn't have 10% extra of their finances. In fact, many of their families were negative percentage in their income versus their expenses. And in those times when they were going to these churches that told them that to give 10% of their income was the bare minimum for faithfulness to God, many of their families gave the 10% when they had 0 extra percent or negative extra percent. So here's the stories. When that happened, one person told me they went without new shoes. Their shoes had holes in them. Another person told me they outgrew their clothes and had to have the same clothes. Another person told me that monthly, on the regular, their pantry and refrigerator ran out of food for them to eat, and they just went hungry. And that's just wrong. And even though it just started raining, I have to be in the car. True confession time. I taught that because that's what I was taught. But I remember when I realized it was wrong, and I brought it up in a meeting with the pastors. Maybe we shouldn't teach this. Maybe we should teach something else. And they said, well, we can't tell them to give 22.5%. They would never do it. And they would never even try because it would seem like too much to ask. But this seems somewhat reasonable. So we should keep asking for this, even though it's not really biblical. It was really just greed. Yeah. It was greed. So I couldn't change what was being taught because I wasn't in the leadership at that level. But I just opted out. Anytime we had one of those programs, sermon series, I told them I wouldn't preach that time. They needed to get someone else. And that doesn't seem like enough, but it's what it is. I feel horrible about it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't give to a church, especially a church that you are attending, you are benefiting from. There's a lot of organizations that work on donations, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. A lot of those organizations, we call them nonprofits in the United States, they do an enormous amount of social good. They benefit a whole lot of people, and you should donate to them. But the problem is when the Bible and the teachings of God and spirituality are, really weaponized for greed to try to keep more and more money coming in. That's got to stop.